Hello, everybody. So I'm looking this morning on Yahoo, and I've been looking at a lot of things, and I've heard talks about impeachment again. And there's a lot going on in the White House, and it always has, but it's really getting hot. And so this article comes out talking about Donald Trump and how he went off the rails and insulted some members of Congress. So it says, off the rails president takes to Twitter in an anti-Semitic and racist rant. And so he wasn't afraid to put it all out there this time. No script reading. He basically went on Twitter and he just put it all out there for everyone to see who he really is, which, hey, it didn't take much for me to notice what was going on. I saw this already, long back when they had the Central Park 5 case. I saw this. And so, even before that, pretty much what I remember when Donald Trump, before he became elected president, he always bragged about his money and his fortune, and he seemed to be more about himself than others. And he seemed to be about just his ego, and he's every bit the same. He hasn't really changed much. A lot of people were building him up and saying that he's such a business person. But a lot of those businesses, if you really, really read into a lot of that, they didn't do well. And he's had a lot of enemies in the past, and he's making new ones without fail. And so this is an article out of Yahoo, and it says, off the rails president takes to Twitter an anti-Semitic and racist rant. And this is by Peter Wade of Rolling Stone magazine, or article. And so with the continuing pressure of the impeachment inquiry underway and the never-ending flow of damning and controversial news, President Donald Trump took to Twitter on Saturday with a racist and anti-Semitic rant. So in one tweet, Trump singled out members of Congress, Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff, who are both Jewish, and an OAC +3, referring to Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and the 3 congresswomen who all are women of color, calling them savages. So there's other related articles that kind of go into the impeachment probe and some of the other things that are going on. And so it's pretty crazy lately. It's been all about impeachment, or the talks of that. And so it goes on to say in this article, can you imagine, this is Trump's tweet, basically blown up, can you imagine if these do-nothing Democrat savages, people like Nadler and Schiff and AOC +3, and many more, had a Republican Party who would have done to Obama what the do-nothings are doing to me? Oh, well, maybe next time, the president tweeted. So you can see underneath, that's the same exact words basically blown up in his tweet rant, as usual. So journalists and presidential candidates alike reacted on Twitter, pointing out the bigotry contained in the president's rant. So Beto O'Rourke called Trump's tweets dangerous, writing that he calls 6 members of Congress and a woman all women of color were Jewish savages. So he wants you to think of them as less than human. So like when he calls immigrants an infestation and says no human being would want to live in Baltimore, we can't be surprised when violence follows. And so that's basically what Beto O'Rourke tweeted, and it's blown up. And so Trump, he says the same thing underneath. You can see that. And so it has really gotten crazy. And so we have a comment from Gabrielle Sherman. Wow, he's calling 2 Jews and a Hispanic savages. It's all out in the open now. And so everybody is starting to take notice of all of these tweet rants from President Donald Trump. And Washington Post columnist Dana Milbank also pointed out who the president chose to single out in these tweets as compared to how many support impeachment overall. So see how he does that. And so he wrote that more than 200 House Democrats support impeachment. But the ones he singles out as savages are the two Jews and the 4 women of color. And so that's basically her, or it's not a her actually. Well, it looks like it might be a her. It could be, it says Dana Milbank. And so this is a blown up version of their comment. So everybody is basically taking notice to the tweet rants. And so Donald Trump underneath, you can see where he says that there's presidential harassment. So after the bigoted tweet, Trump then set off 3 rapid fires of all caps tweets, all within a minute of each other. In the first, he framed himself as a victim of presidential harassment. And then he tweeted his original campaign slogan, "Make America Great Again," followed by his imaginative new slogan, "Keep America Great." And so basically those were his tweet rants, and he was going off this morning off the rails. So that's pretty much it. The article was not that, lengthy, but it really was to the point about where things are headed in terms of this administration and this presidency with 45. And so what do you think of this? It's really gotten crazy and out of control. And there are programs that are being cut. There's a lot of things that are happening. He came and visited Los Angeles, and he wasn't that pleased with Los Angeles, and he wasn't that pleased with San Francisco due to the homelessness, and he's also tying the homelessness along to the climate crisis as well. Believe it or not. I read that somewhere. I was like, wow. And the pollution, I believe, actually the pollution, because of the fact that, when there's homeless people, they put all of their excrements out on the street and the sidewalks, and then their trash and their belongings are out there, and it breeds an infestation of rats and vermin and all the other to go with it, and disease. So he coins that as pollution, which also goes off and spreads to other people, and then polluting. A lot of trash and everything and clutter causes the area to be pretty much an infested and uninhabitable place to reside. And so I have to admit, there are a lot of homelessness, but I believe it's due to a lot of the programs being cut. The rents are really high, and recently what they have tried to do is raise the rents and to some places, and then they have tried to pass a bill. So there was a bill that was passed about the rents in California. And there was talk that it's a good idea, and then there was talk that it was a bad idea. And the landlords weren't very happy about the rents. The bill was passed on rent control in California. And so would AOC's national rent control solve the housing crisis or make it even worse? And that's the talks. And so Oregon was one of the first ones to implement a rent control statewide. And it was one of the first. Rent control is a better than nothing, they say, in their opinion, but it can't fix California's housing crisis. So there's several articles that I've seen that popped up about rent control. And if you look, here it says legislatures passed California rent control. And it says it was September the 12th of 2019. So it's a statewide rent control that is expected to soon take effect in California after the bill would place a cap on apartment rental rates. And so the rent has been really, really high in California. And those that don't know of the California region, it has really been atrociously high, to the point to where it has caused some people to where they end up outdoors unless you have a job and you can cover those back payments or rent. you're pretty much screwed, for lack of a better word. And so these articles have popped up all over the place in regard to some of the growing pressures here in the cities. And so I've seen a number of them. And San Francisco was blasted. Los Angeles was blasted by President Donald Trump. He made a couple of trips here, and he pretty much said that the homeless crisis is really depreciating the states, and it's depreciating the values and the prestige of the states, and he's not happy about it. But if you look at some of the programs that he's cutting, you know, it almost seems as though it's a contradictory of what he claims that he wants to happen, wanting to not have the homeless issue happen, but he's cutting programs that kind of contribute, or won't say kind of, they contribute to more homelessness. And so statewide rent control is expected to soon take effect in California after a bill that would place a cap on apartment rental rates passed the state legislature this week. And so this is all of California. So an AB, it's called the AB 1482. It's authored by the Assemblyman David Chiu of San Francisco, that would prohibit property owners from raising the rent for more than 5% plus inflation over a 12-month period. And so the bill would also prohibit property owners from raising rent more than twice over a 12-month period once the tenant has occupied the home for more than a year. And so the rent control rules exempt most single-family homes as well as homes built within the last 15 years. So for the affected properties, the rent control regulations are retroactive in March 15, 2019 to all the way to March 15, 2019. So if property owners violate the provisions over the duration of this year, the tenant's rent at the beginning of 2020 would revert back to the rate it was March 15th. And so that's like penalizing them. So in addition to enacting the rent control, the bill makes it more difficult for property owners to evict the long-term tenants. So AB 1482 forbids property owners from terminating a lease without a just cause after a tenant has occupied the home for about 12 months, with limited exceptions. So California Governor Gavin Newsom has already indicated that he will sign this legislature. So California just passed the strongest rent control package in America. Newsom stated that in a tweet on Wednesday that the rent is too damn high. So we're damn sure doing something about it. So AB 1482 passed the state Senate, and it was a vote to 25 to 10 vote on Tuesday, and the Assembly on 14 to 26 vote on Wednesday. And so this thing is a surefire thing that is going to happen. I just wanted to let you guys know that it has something to do with some of the issues that are happening as well in terms of the rent issue in some of the metropolitan states. And I don't know if other states are going to follow suit, but I've heard that some other states are looking at this really closely, and they're trying to follow suit with this same priority, because there's so much homelessness. It's spreading even outside of California. There are other places like Oregon was one, and so they had a rent control, and then Seattle's another one. And then there's been some other states that have had some really big issues with homelessness. I believe Atlanta, and then there's Chicago, and some other places where they have really, really nice neighborhoods where they have these condos, and they're building more luxury apartments. They're not building affordable housing. So now they have some people who are really on the ball trying to build some affordable housing in certain areas, but it's just slow going. And so there's a huge crisis that seems like it has exploded from Skid Row. Seemed like it was just a small little region, and it's just going everywhere. And now you're seeing homeless people that are in front of businesses. There are businesses that are in the Los Angeles area that have shut down because of the homeless encampments that are right outside of the businesses. It kind of makes the business look uninviting, and people don't want to go there, because you'll have people that come into the businesses and they interrupt the services that are happening there, or they make it feel unpleasant or uncomfortable to, if it's a restaurant, to eat there. And so, and then too, with all of the other things that are going on, I believe when you have homelessness there, and when it's chronic homelessness, there could be possible issues with crime, and infestation of rats and rodents, and diseases. And it depends on where and who it is, which there's different levels of homelessness. There's some people sleeping in their cars, sleeping in motels, sleeping in RVs. Then you have people that are just sleeping on the street and bus benches and in parks and out in the open and around public businesses and in alleys and whatnot. And then you have some people who have mental illness, and then others who are, that maybe they have depression, or they were off their meds, or they're coming from out of jail or prison. They are not able to find jobs and secure a safe place to live. And there's homeless vets, and there's just families that are homeless because they were several months behind on their rent, or maybe they just can't afford rent. It's not even being behind, they just can't afford it, and so they wind up in motels and hotels and what have you. And so this is what's been happening. It's been happening in a lot of different places. Anaheim, it's been happening over there at the Angel Stadium. There was a huge homeless encampment. And it seems like when they clean up the areas and they do this cleanup thing, then within the hour, the people start coming back to the same places where they were encamping, and they start all over again. And so they've spent a whole lot of money trying to clear out these places, but clearing it out is not enough because the people still don't have a place to go. And now they're saying that there is also a law that you cannot ban people from sleeping on the streets. So that's another thing that's been happening. And this is not sitting well with property owners and people that are in the cities, and they've been very upset about this. So the law that says that you cannot ban homeless people sleeping on the streets. Okay, and so these are images. You're going to see some images. It says it's unconstitutional to ban homeless from sleeping on the streets. And so more council members now oppose banning where homelessness is. And so some people are for it and others are against this whole thing of banning banning people from sleeping on the streets, and not enacting. Some people want them to enact a law that would prohibit people from sleeping on the streets because it's depreciating neighborhoods and whatnot. So I don't know if I can see this out of the Washington Post, because I read a lot of Washington Post articles, so sometimes it won't let me. So it says it's unconstitutional to ban the homeless from sleeping outside, the federal government is saying. And so a lot of people are not sitting well with this. So this is what you'll see, and it's not even just in California. You'll see it in a lot of places. And so, well, this is by Emily Badger, and so this was August 13, 2015. So this right here is a homeless man that takes a nap on a bench at a snow-covered Lafayette Park in the White House, near the White House in Washington. So homelessness is out there as well, right where the White House is. And so, well, all you need is sleep. We all need sleep. And so, which is in fact a fact of life, but also legally important point. So last week, the Department of Justice argued as much in a statement of interest it filed in a relatively obscure case in Boise, Idaho, that could impact how cities regulate and punish homelessness. So Boise, like many cities, the number of which has swelled since the recession, has an ordinance banning sleeping or camping in public places. But such laws, the DOJ, Department of Justice, says effectively criminalize homeless homelessness itself in situations where people simply have nowhere else to sleep. So the Department of Justice filing, when adequate shelter space exists, individuals have a choice about whether or not to sleep in public. However, when adequate shelter space does not exist, there is no meaningful distinction between the status of being homeless and the conduct of sleeping in public. So sleeping in is a life-sustaining activity. In example, it must occur at some time in some place. So if a person literally has nowhere else to go, then enforcement of an anti-camping ordinance against the person criminalizes her for being homeless. So such laws, the Department of Justice argued, violate the Eighth Amendment protections against cruel and unusual punishment, making them unconstitutional. By weighing in on this case, the Department of Justice first foray in 2 decades into this still unsettled area of law, the federal government is warning cities far beyond Boise and backing up federal goals to treat homelessness more humanely instead of policing it, of course. So it's huge, says Eric Tars, a senior attorney for the National Center of Homelessness and Poverty, the National Law Center for Homelessness and Poverty, which originally filed the lawsuit against Boise alongside Idaho Legal Aid Services. So according to the NLCHP report last year that surveyed 187 cities where between 2011 and 2014, 37% had citywide laws banning camping in public, another 43% prohibited sleeping in vehicles, 53% banning sitting or lying down in certain public places, and all of these laws criminalize the kind of activities, sitting, resting, sleeping, that are arguably fundamental to human existence. And they've criminalized that behavior in the environment where most cities have far more homeless than shelter beds. So in 2014, the federal government estimates that there is about 153,000 unsheltered homeless on the street in the U.S. on any given night. Now that was back then. That was 2014. So we know it has exploded now. And so this is all coming back again as an issue, whether they should criminalize people for sleeping in the streets and sleeping in cars and banning them from sleeping in public places when they're homeless. So laws like these, I added that in there, of course. I'm just letting you know some of these are some of the things and the issues that are being raised all over again. So laws like these have grown more common in that math has actually grown worse since the recession. So homelessness is just becoming more visible in communities. And this was in 2014, so we're in 2019, going into 2020. And so it is off the rails right now with the homeless crisis. It's now been called a crisis. It used to be like just homelessness. Now it is homeless crises. And so homelessness is just becoming more visible in communities. And when homelessness becomes more visible, then there's pressure on community leaders to do something about it. So Tar says, so rather than the actual examining what's the best thing to do about homelessness and the knee-jerk response, as with so many other things in society as well, address the social issue with criminal justice system. So it's also easier, he adds, for the elected officials to argue for criminal penalties when the public costs of the policy are much harder to see than the cost of investing in shelters and services for poor. So ultimately, though, advocates in the federal government have argued that it's much more expensive to ticket homelessness with the court, prison, and health costs associated with it than to invest in housing first solutions that have worked in many parts of the country. So criminal citations also compound the problem of homelessness, making it hard for people to qualify for jobs or housing in the future as well. So you have to check those criminal boxes on the application forms, Tar says, and they don't say, were you arrested because you were trying to simply survive on the streets? They say, if you have an arrest record, we're not going to rent to you. So NLCHP goal, which is Tar says, isn't to protect the rights of the people to live on the streets, but to prevent and end homelessness altogether. So the means adding a lot more shelter beds and housing options in places like Boise, in which has 3 shelters run by 2 nonprofits, and so people have options other than the street. So Department of Justice has argued it's based on the logic in the earlier Ninth Circuit decisions, striking down the vagrancy law in Los Angeles that was ultimately vacated in a settlement. Okay, so the logic specifically says it's unconstitutional to punish people for sleeping outside if there aren't enough beds for them to sleep indoors. So if there are, the Constitution questions would be different, although the moral of the policy implications may remain the same. So homelessness never left town because somebody gave it a ticket, Tarr says. The only way to end homelessness is to make sure that everybody has access to affordable, decent housing. And so that's pretty much it. So this is by Emily Badger, who was a reporter of the Walk blog covering urban policy, and she left the Washington Post in September of 2016. So that was back then. But this issue is still hot off the presses. It's still going on even now that we're pretty soon we'll be in the year of 2020. And so all this stuff is sort of intertwined and coming back all over again. So I'm kind of doing, a multitude in this video here. So what are your thoughts of this? We go from the breakdown in the White House with President Donald Trump and him, tweeting off his rants, and the rent problems that have now been passed through legislator passing in California rent control bill. And then we go into the homeless crises. And should they penalize homeless people for sleeping in front of businesses and public places? And so all of these things, President Trump has come here and he has blasted Los Angeles and San Francisco for the homeless crises exploding, and pretty much blamed, put the pin to blame on all of this, and says it's also tied to the pollution, and that it has caused a problem, and it's tied to other issues. It's ruining the environment and depreciating the cities. So what are your thoughts and feedback on this? Without further ado, I'm going to let this video go for right now, but this is really, really hot, and I don't think it's going away no time soon. And I feel like this, as long as you have people who are just egocentric and they're about their own money and their own success and their own livelihood, and they really don't care much about anybody else and what they're doing to live a safe life, all they are concerned about is just hoarding their own riches and their own money, then you're going to constantly have these battles. So without that, I don't know if people are really thinking clear or that they're just thinking about themselves only, is what it looks like. There's an issue with poor against people who just don't have a lot of money versus people who have a lot of money, and poor versus the wealthy, and those that haves and those that have nots. And that's what it looks like. And it looks like it just doesn't get any better, because some people are not about trying to help others. They're about themselves. They're about looking out for only themselves, and they're very egocentric and greedy. So having said that, thanks for listening.